I was hiking alone through a stretch of the Appalachian Mountains. I had started that morning early, planning to make it to a backcountry shelter by late afternoon. But the trail markers had been confusing, and I ended up following the wrong ridge past a creek I didn't recognize. By the time I realized I'd gone off course, the sun was already low behind the hills, casting everything in this dim orange light that made it harder to judge distance or direction. My GPS had one bar, and the map app kept freezing. I wasn't panicking yet, but I knew I wasn't where I was supposed to be. It got dark fast. I wasn't expecting to camp that night, so I didn't have my tent unpacked or food ready. I had maybe half a bottle of water left, a protein bar, and my flashlight. The woods got quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful, just still and watching. Every snap of a twig or rustle in the leaves made me stop and turn. I told myself it was just deer or maybe a raccoon, but my mind kept reaching for worse things. I started looking for a flat patch of ground to maybe bivvy for the night, somewhere dry where I wouldn't roll down a slope. I was climbing a narrow path, rocks and roots slick under my boots, when I saw a flicker of light through the trees up ahead. At first I thought it was a trick of my headlamp, maybe a reflection off something metallic. But then I saw it again, orange, shifting, dancing. Fire. Relieved, I started moving toward it. My first thought was that someone else had made camp out here, maybe another hiker or even someone living off-grid. Either way, I figured I'd just explain I was lost and ask if I could sit by their fire until morning. I called out as I walked, just a simple, "Hey!" Nothing loud, nothing aggressive. No answer. I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. But the fire stayed steady, visible between the trees. When I reached the clearing, I stopped. It wasn't what I expected. There was no tent, no backpack, no food, just a fire, built neatly with a ring of stones, burning strong and hot like someone had just added wood to it. And in front of it, a single metal chair. One of those old, weathered folding chairs, the kind you'd find at a fishing camp or outside a rundown trailer. It was positioned directly in front of the fire, facing it like someone had been sitting there minutes before I arrived. But there was no one. I stood at the edge of the trees, scanning. Nothing moved. No sound of boots on leaves. No zipper from a tent. No voices. I looked down at the ground. There were fresh boot prints in the dirt near the fire, just a few. But they didn't come from the direction I had. They led away, off into the woods behind the fire. Not toward it, just away. Something about that didn't sit right. I couldn't figure out how someone had come in, built a fire, and left without leaving any gear behind. Or why the fire was still going if they'd walked off. Fires die out fast if they're not fed. This one was tall and strong. Flames, not embers. I stepped closer, slowly. The warmth hit my face and hands. Felt too fresh, too recent. I called out again. My voice cracked a bit this time. Still no answer. I circled the fire slowly, checking for any sign of where the person might have gone. Any clue why they left a burning fire in the middle of nowhere. I looked back toward the trail I came from, then scanned the trees again, squinting hard. And then I heard it, just a soft snap of a branch behind me. I spun around instantly, flashlight cutting through the dark between the trees. Nothing, just woods, trees, shadows, a tangle of brush. I waited, holding my breath, tried to listen over the sound of the fire crackling behind me. But there was nothing else. I turned back toward the fire. The chair was facing the other direction. I stopped dead. I hadn't heard it move. No scrape, no creak. But it was turned now, away from the fire, pointed out into the trees, directly toward where I had come from. Toward me. That was it. Something in me broke right there. I didn't shout or scream or try to make sense of it. I just turned and ran. I didn't even look back at the fire. I tore through the woods as fast as I could, using the beam of my flashlight to keep from slamming into a tree. My pack bounced hard on my back, and I tripped more than once on roots and rocks. But I kept going. Eventually, I had to stop. I was gasping for air, chest heaving, hands shaking. My legs felt like rubber. I didn't know how far I'd run, maybe a mile, maybe less. I found a spot near a cluster of boulders and collapsed beside them, crouched low and trying to listen for anything behind me, for footsteps, for movement. But all I could hear was the sound of my own blood pounding in my ears and some far-off owl calling into the night. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even unpack my sleeping bag. I just sat there with my back against one of the boulders, flashlight gripped in my hand, watching the dark. At first light, I checked my GPS again. Somehow, I had 2 bars, enough to reorient. I hiked back toward a ranger access road I'd crossed the day before, moving as fast as I could. Took hours, but I didn't stop. When I reached the road and finally saw a truck parked near a trailhead, I almost broke down right there. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not really. I mentioned I'd gotten lost, found a fire, and it freaked me out. Left it at that. But the truth is, I still think about it more than I want to admit. The fire had been real. The chair had moved, and someone had lit that fire out there, deep in the woods with no gear, no shelter, and no reason to leave it burning like that. And those boot prints, they only led one way. I don't know who was out there. I don't know if they were watching me the whole time. I don't know what they wanted. But I do know one thing: I'll never hike alone out there again. Not in that part of the mountains. Not after that night. I was bow hunting deep in a section of forest in northern Wisconsin. It was early October, just starting to get cold, and the leaves had mostly turned. Bright reds, dull yellows, some trees already bare. This area wasn't public land, but I had gotten permission from a friend who owned a few hundred acres of forested property out past any service roads. There were no marked trails, no cell signal, nothing but trees and brush for miles. I'd spent the night before at a little cabin about 5 miles out, got up at around 4 a.m., packed my gear, and started the hike in while it was still pitch black. The air felt damp that morning. It had rained the night before, so everything was slick. My boots sunk slightly into the mud with each step, and my clothes kept brushing wet branches. I used a headlamp for the first part of the hike, but once the sun began to rise, I switched it off. The light just started creeping through the trees, that soft gray-blue color you get before sunrise, the kind that makes everything feel quiet and still. I walked for almost 2 hours, trying to get as far in as I could. I wanted to be completely away from anything human. I carried a climber stand strapped to my back, but as I moved through a thicket, I spotted an old wooden tree stand nailed to a big oak. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. The wood was dark and weathered, green in some places where moss had grown, but it still looked solid enough. It was about 20 feet up and had a small platform with an old railing around it. I checked the ladder, still sturdy, and decided to use it instead of setting up my own. Once I got up there, I took off my pack, got my bow set, and settled in. The view was perfect. Clearings to the left and right, dense brush straight ahead, and enough leaf cover above me to keep my silhouette broken. I sat for a while, just listening to the forest wake up. Birds chirping, squirrels bouncing through leaves, that sort of thing. Time passed slowly, the kind of stillness where you can hear every tiny sound, even your own breath. I sat motionless for almost an hour, scanning. Then I saw something. About 60 yards ahead, half hidden between 2 trees, there was a man, dressed in full camo, but I could make out his shape because he wasn't behind cover. He was just standing there, not walking, not moving, just standing and facing directly toward me. At first, I figured he was another hunter. Maybe he didn't know I was there. Maybe he was watching a deer or something. But the longer I looked, the more something felt off. He wasn't holding a bow or a gun. His hands were at his sides. No binoculars, no rangefinder, no movement at all. And he was staring right at me, not scanning, not shifting his weight, not even blinking from what I could tell. Just fixed like he was watching me. I raised my hand and waved. Just a quick wave. No response. He didn't move an inch. I thought maybe he couldn't see me clearly, so I called out, not shouting, just loud enough to carry, "Hey, you good?" Still nothing. No flinch, no wave, no head tilt. Instead, he just slowly raised one hand. Not both, just his right, and pointed past me, over my shoulder. No urgency, just slow and deliberate. I turned around instantly. My heart was already racing. The tree behind me was tall and thick, and beyond it was just woods. Nothing there. I scanned the trees. No movement, no sound, just empty forest. When I turned back around, the man was gone. He didn't run off. I didn't hear leaves crunching, no branches breaking, no sign of movement in any direction. He had just vanished. 1 second he was there, the next, nothing. I stayed frozen for a long minute, gripping my bow tight, listening. But all I could hear was my own breathing, louder now. I slowly stood up, scanned again, and then made the decision. I didn't want to be up there anymore. I didn't want to be in that tree or that part of the woods. I climbed down as fast as I could without falling. I didn't even pack my gear properly. I stuffed things into my pack, slung my bow over my shoulder, and started walking out. I wasn't running, but I was moving fast. Every step I took, I kept glancing behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not in a paranoid way, just in that way your gut tells you to get out of somewhere. I followed the same route I'd used coming in, but after maybe 20 minutes, I stopped dead. In a patch of mud ahead of me, I saw tracks, bare footprints, human, adult-sized. The prints came out from the woods and went straight toward the direction of the old tree stand. No boots, no socks. Bare feet in the middle of thick forest, far from any road or trail. And they were fresh. You could still see the water pooled inside the heel of one. I just stared at them for a second. They weren't mine. I had heavy boots on. I hadn't passed anyone. I hadn't even heard anything. But these prints crossed the trail I had just used and pointed toward the tree stand I'd been sitting in. I started moving again, faster now, checking behind me constantly. The woods felt different. Not louder or quieter, just heavier. Like the air itself was thicker. I kept hearing little cracks and rustles off to my left and right, but every time I stopped to look, nothing. Just trees. Just undergrowth. Maybe it was animals, maybe it wasn't. When I finally got to the edge of the woods, it was late morning. The sun was higher up now, and the sky was clear. But I didn't feel relief. I didn't even stop to rest. I hiked straight back to the cabin, locked the door behind me, and stayed inside for the rest of the day. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with the lights off, just watching the tree line. Next morning, I packed up and left. I didn't even go back to get the gear I left behind. The climber stand, the extra arrows, even the thermos, left it all. I didn't care. I don't know who that man was or what he was doing out there, barefoot and silent. I don't know how he disappeared without a sound, or why he pointed past me like that. But I've hunted all over the Midwest, in deep woods, mountain valleys, wide open plains, and I've never felt anything like that moment. That feeling in my gut, that cold grip in my chest when I saw those footprints. I never went back to that section of forest again, and I don't plan to. It was early September when my girlfriend and I decided to take a backpacking trip deep into one of the more remote forested basins in Colorado. We were both experienced hikers and liked to push into places off-trail, places that didn't show up on casual maps. This basin was a quiet one we'd read about in an old forum post. A deep cut between steep pine-covered ridges, with no official trail but a natural stream route you could follow if you knew how to navigate terrain. We'd spent the first night in a meadow near a dried-up creek, completely alone. No one around for miles. No reception. Just trees, peaks, and the smell of pine needles baking in the sun. The second morning, we broke camp early and moved a couple miles deeper into the basin. The slope was steep in some parts, and we used our trekking poles to stay balanced as we climbed around deadfall and overgrown brush. After about 4 hours, we found a spot that felt right. A flat opening among the trees, close to a small trickling spring, shaded and soft with moss underfoot. We set up our tent on a patch of level ground near a few thick tree trunks, our usual two-person dome style, dull green with black trim, a model we'd used on at least 6 trips before. That evening, after we ate and packed up our food into a bear bag, I told her I'd be gone for a few minutes to take care of bathroom stuff. I walked about 50 yards away from camp, through the undergrowth, until I found a private enough spot behind a fallen log. I started digging a cat hole with my small trowel, pushing down into the damp earth. The soil wasn't too rocky, but I hit something solid after just a few inches. I thought maybe it was a root or a buried rock, but as I cleared more around it, I realized it was metal. Rusted. Corners. It was a small tin box. Old, beat up, but still sealed. Not buried deeply, just a few inches under the surface. I hesitated for a second, kind of grossed out. This was supposed to be the middle of nowhere. Why would there be something buried here? Still, curiosity won. I brushed the dirt off and pried it open. Inside were Polaroid photos. Dozens of them. Some were stuck together with water damage and mold around the edges, but most were clear enough to see. The photos were all of the same thing, a tent. The same exact tent. Our model, our color. The same basic setup. What freaked me out instantly was how each photo was from a different distance. Some far back, almost hidden in the trees. Others closer, angled from the side or partially obscured behind brush. Some taken at dusk, others in daylight. I flipped through them faster, my hands shaking without realizing. Then I saw one with a date in faded black ink along the white border. Just 2 weeks ago. The tent in that photo, identical to ours. Same slight lean to the left, same duct-taped repair on the corner. The same goddamn model. In the next photo, the tent was shown again, but this time zoomed in through a set of pine branches. It showed a person inside the tent, lying down, half covered by a sleeping bag. The face wasn't visible, but the shape, the position, it was from the exact angle you'd see if someone was watching us from the woods. I felt sick. I dropped the box and looked up around me. Every sound suddenly felt too loud. The wind moving through the needles, the distant creak of a branch, some bird calling nearby. My breathing was heavy, chest tight. I couldn't stop looking around. I grabbed the box, stuffed the photos back in, and jogged back to camp. We didn't talk. I didn't even show her the photos right away. I just started packing quickly and without a word. She got the message and helped, sensing something was wrong. We had about 2 hours of daylight left, but I didn't care. I didn't want to stay there another minute. I told her I'd explain everything later, once we were moving. We hiked out fast, headlamps ready as dusk fell. The shadows in the forest grew long, and every rustle in the brush made my skin crawl. We weren't following any trail, and the terrain was rough, but I kept glancing over my shoulder. I had this intense feeling, something I'd never really experienced before, that we were being watched. Not just paranoia, something deeper, more primal, like being hunted. At one point, maybe 2 hours into our retreat, we stopped near a stream to refill water. While she filtered it, I took out the tin again and looked through the photos more carefully with my headlamp. One picture stopped me cold. It was darker, harder to make out at first, but I saw it, our tent, from the exact location we had set up that night. Same arrangement, same tree to the left. The timestamp on the back had been smudged by water, but I could still read part of it. The month matched, the week matched. The last photo was tucked in the bottom of the stack. I hadn't seen it before. It was newer, less water damaged. The angle was from up close, like someone standing just 20 feet away. The trees in the background matched ours. And the scariest part? In the frame, you could clearly see someone's silhouette through the nylon wall of the tent. Lying down, sleeping. It was us. I wanted to throw up. I didn't know if the photo had been taken before we found the box, or after. We hiked until midnight using our headlamps, following the GPS coordinates I had saved earlier as breadcrumbs. I kept checking behind us, watching for movement. Nothing. Just the deep silence of forest at night. But that silence wasn't calming. It felt like it was pressing in, heavy and suffocating. Every now and then, we'd stop and turn off our lights, just to listen. I didn't hear anything following us, but that didn't make me feel better. We reached the trailhead just before 2 a.m. There was no one else around. Our car was untouched, parked where we left it, under a thin layer of dust and pine pollen. As we drove away down the winding dirt road, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting headlights or movement in the treeline. We didn't speak much on the drive. My girlfriend was shaken, but I didn't tell her the full story until we were back home the next day. Safe in our apartment, doors locked, city sounds outside. When I showed her the photos, she stared at them for a long time. She didn't say much, just nodded. I didn't report it to anyone. What could I even say? That we found a tin box with photos in the woods? No evidence of a crime, no bodies, no actual harm. But that didn't change how I felt. It wasn't just the photos. It was the intention behind them. Someone had been documenting people camping out there, watching them, studying their patterns, getting close enough to take pictures while they slept. I destroyed the box and burned the photos in a fire pit in our backyard. Watched them curl and turn black. I thought that would help. Didn't. That was 6 months ago. I haven't gone into the backcountry since. I still hike, still love the outdoors, but I stick to populated trails now. Places with other people, with cell service, with cars passing every now and then. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking about it. How close someone must have been to our tent the night that picture was taken. 10 feet away, maybe closer, watching us through the trees while we slept, completely unaware. And the worst part? We don't know how many more boxes like that are buried out there, or how long this has been going on. I'd been hiking through Northern California for 2 days by then. Real remote stretch of forest. Dense pines, long stretches without trail markers, not even the sound of planes overhead. Just birds, wind in the trees, and the occasional squirrel or deer. I liked it that way. I'd packed enough to last 4 days. Freeze-dried food, a small stove, lightweight tent, the usual gear. I kept to myself, moved slow, and stayed quiet. No service on my phone, obviously. Just GPS and a compass when I needed it. By that second evening, I was hours from the nearest road, and I hadn't seen a single other person all day. I was moving along a narrow trail that ran along a shallow ridge. The light was starting to drop fast. Those thick woods turned dusk into dark real quick. That's when I saw him, about 50 feet ahead, just around a bend in the trail. A man, tall, thin, wearing faded jeans and a dark sweatshirt. No backpack, no water bottle, no gear at all. He didn't look dirty like a hiker or someone who'd been outside long. He looked clean, hair neatly combed, clothes not wrinkled, no visible dust or sweat. I don't know why, but something about him immediately made my stomach tighten. Instinct, maybe. I called out, casually, just a "Hey, man," like I was trying not to startle him. He didn't turn around, didn't flinch, just kept walking. I picked up my pace a bit. I wasn't trying to confront him or anything. I just wanted to get a better look. Maybe he was in trouble. Maybe he'd gotten separated from a group or had lost his stuff. But when I rounded the next curve in the trail, he was gone. Just gone. There weren't any side paths. No rocks or trees big enough to hide behind. It was a straight stretch for another 100 feet or so. I stopped and scanned the woods. Nothing. Total silence except for the occasional gust of wind through the branches. I waited for a minute, then slowly kept walking, eyes moving from side to side. By the time I stopped to set up camp, the sun had dipped below the trees, and everything was cast in that dim bluish light that makes shapes weird and distances feel off. I decided not to sleep near the trail. I cut off to the right, through a patch of thicker brush, maybe 15 minutes of walking until I found a small clearing surrounded by trees. Not big enough for a fire, but good enough to stay hidden. I didn't eat much that night. My stomach was still twisted from what I saw or didn't see. Earlier, I just boiled some water, had a granola bar, and crawled into my sleeping bag inside the tent. I zipped everything tight and lay still for a while, just listening to the wind. Every now and then I'd hear a branch crack somewhere out in the woods, but that's normal. Forests talk. They creak and shift. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember was waking up. No noise, just this feeling, like something had changed. My heart was already beating fast before I even opened my eyes. I stayed completely still, listening. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Light, slow, just outside the tent. Not crashing through the brush like a deer. Not four-legged. These were soft, human steps. One at a time. Crunch of dry leaves. A careful kind of movement. They circled the tent once, then again. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just stared up through the thin nylon, eyes wide, knife in my hand under the sleeping bag. The third time around, they stopped for a long moment near the entrance. I didn't dare make a sound. Then, nothing. Just gone. I waited, frozen, for at least an hour. Maybe more. I didn't even check the time. Eventually, the forest sounds came back. A distant owl, the wind again. I must have drifted off at some point because next thing I knew, it was morning. Early light filtering through the trees. I got out of the tent slowly, knife still in hand. Everything looked normal at first. No obvious signs of someone nearby. I checked the ground, expecting to see prints. The dirt was soft enough that anything should have left a mark. But there was nothing. No impressions around the tent. No broken branches or disturbed leaves. But then, off to the left, maybe 10 feet away, right at the base of a tree, I saw it. A sweatshirt, folded, neatly, just sitting there like someone had taken it off and laid it down with care. Same color and style as the one the man on the trail had been wearing. I didn't walk over to it right away. I just stood there staring for a long time. I kept looking around the woods, expecting someone to step out from behind a tree or call out. Nothing. Eventually, I walked over. I used a stick to nudge the sweatshirt. No bugs, no dirt. Looked brand new. I didn't touch it with my hands. I just backed away and started packing my stuff. I skipped breakfast, took down my tent in record time. My plan had been to keep heading north, maybe camp another night or two before looping back. But not after that. I turned around and started hiking out. Fast, way faster than usual. I didn't stop for water, didn't rest, just kept moving. The weird part, I didn't feel like I was alone. The whole way back, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every gust of wind or snapping branch made me flinch. And the trail, somehow it felt different. I'd walked it 2 days before, but it felt longer now, like it was stretching out. That afternoon, I finally got to the forest road. A single car was parked there, mine. No other hikers. No one. I didn't even take off my boots. I just got in and drove. Didn't feel fully calm until I hit a gas station on the edge of a small town. Hours later, I never figured out who that man was, or how he disappeared so fast, or how that sweatshirt ended up at my camp. I thought about reporting it, but what would I even say? No crime, no real evidence, just a gut-deep fear I couldn't shake. All I know is something wasn't right out there. Some people don't belong in places that wild, and maybe that man wasn't lost. Maybe he wasn't even hiking. Maybe he was waiting, and maybe I wasn't the first person he followed. We set up camp deep in the woods of Vermont, a few miles off any marked trail. It was me, Ryan, Mike, and Dan. We'd been planning this trip for a couple months. Just 4 old friends from college wanting a break from everything. No cell service, no people, just quiet, trees, and time to breathe. It was early October, leaves turning, air crisp, not too cold. We hiked most of the day before finding a small clearing near a narrow stream. There were no signs of others, no wrappers, no fire rings, no footprints. Perfect. We set up our tents in a loose square, maybe 10 or 15 feet between each, built a fire, cooked up some food, told stories, laughed about dumb stuff from college. It was peaceful in a way that made you forget the outside world even existed. That night, we all crashed hard. The second night was when things started getting weird. I woke up around 2 or 3 in the morning. First, I thought I was dreaming. There was this whispering outside the tent. Not close, not right at the flap, but maybe 6 or 8 feet away. It didn't sound like wind. It was deliberate. Pauses, changes in tone. Not quite words I could make out, but something that felt like words, like the rhythm of conversation, but low, almost careful. I held my breath. It went on for maybe a minute, then silence. Next morning at the fire, I didn't say anything, but Ryan suddenly asked, "Did any of you hear something last night?" Like, whispering. One by one, we all admitted the same. All of us had heard whispers outside our tents, at different times. Ryan said he heard it around 1 Dan thought it was closer to 4. Mike said he didn't check the time, just lay frozen. We joked it off, said maybe it was animals or wind. Maybe our brains were just playing tricks on us. Long hikes, long days, but there was something about the way we all sat there. No one really laughed. The fire popped and none of us looked each other in the eye for long. After breakfast, we started noticing little things. My hiking boots weren't where I'd left them. They were a few feet away, side by side, but facing the opposite direction. Ryan's canteen was bone dry, even though he'd filled it before bed. Dan swore his lighter was in his jacket pocket, but he found it tucked inside the foot of his sleeping bag. We went over all the possibilities. Maybe an animal had moved the boots. Maybe someone had forgotten to screw a lid on tight. Maybe we were just tired and clumsy. But there was this weight in the air, like no one really believed what they were saying. We didn't have a signal, but we all agreed to stay one more night. We'd be heading back in 2 days anyway. That evening, we built the fire bigger, let it burn longer. None of us said it, but we were all dragging our feet about going to bed. Finally, one by one, we turned in. It was colder that night, the kind that makes your nose sting a little inside the tent. It was worse that night. This time, the whispering didn't come from a distance. It was right outside the tent, like crouched down close, low and even, like someone thinking out loud. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The hairs on my arms stood straight. It wasn't one voice either. There were at least 2, maybe more. It was like they were observing, not talking to me, not even about me, just around me. I could hear faint shifts in the dirt, maybe a step or a hand brushing past dry leaves. The voices moved, softly, to the other side of my tent. Then they were gone. Not long after, a scream tore through the woods, came from Mike's tent. Then the zipper loud and fast. I heard him stumble out, calling out, but not saying words, just noise, panic. I yanked my zipper open and scrambled out into the cold. Mike was standing barefoot in the dirt, eyes wide, chest heaving. I saw someone, he managed to say. Someone ran that way. He pointed off into the trees. One by one, we all came out, flashlights in hand, scanning the woods. Nothing, no movement, just silence. The fire was mostly embers now. The only sound was the wind brushing the tops of the trees. But every one of us swore we'd all heard the whispering again, outside our own tents. At the same time, we stood there for a while. No one said much. Eventually, we all sat near the fire, threw on more wood, waited for dawn. None of us went back into the tents. When the sun finally came up, we checked the area. The dirt was soft in places, not muddy, but enough to hold shape. That's when we saw them. Footprints, barefoot, small, adult-sized but narrow, and the toes splayed a little, like someone who hadn't worn shoes in a long time. They weren't just around Mike's tent. They were around all of ours. Some prints circled one tent, paused near another. A few disappeared into the woods, then came back. There were dozens of them. We followed a set of prints for maybe 50 feet before they vanished into harder ground. But what really got to us was how quiet everything was. No birds, no bugs. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. We broke camp fast, packed everything in under 20 minutes. We didn't talk, just moved. On the trail back, we didn't stop for snacks or breaks. Kept walking, watching the trees, barely speaking. Every few minutes, I'd glance behind us, half expecting to see someone or something. We didn't run into anyone on the trail back. No hikers, no rangers, nothing. When we reached the car, I felt like I hadn't exhaled in hours. That night, back home, we got in a group call. None of us could shake it. We went over everything. The whispering, the missing items, the bare footprints. Mike still swears he saw a shape bolt into the trees. No clothes, long hair, skin pale in the moonlight. Just gone in a flash. We've told a few people since. Most just shrug it off. Say maybe it was squatters. Or a prank. But I know what I heard. I know what we saw. Someone was out there with us. They didn't take anything. Didn't hurt us. They just watched. Moved things. Whispered. And they were good at it. Too good. Like they'd done it before. Like they lived out there. Always had. We never went back. None of us camped again that year. Or the next. Even now, years later, I still check the zipper twice when I go camping. And I never sleep without a knife close. Just in case someone's still out there. Watching. I was on day 2 of a solo 4-day trek through a remote section of forest in Oregon. I'd planned the trip carefully, packed light but smart, brought my topographic map, compass, enough food, and emergency gear. It was the kind of trip I'd done before, though this time I'd gone a little farther off trail than usual. I was following a narrow game trail along a ridge and dropped down into a quiet, shaded basin with a clear stream running through it. It looked untouched. No fire rings, no trash, no boot prints. Just thick moss, tall fir trees, and silence. Felt right. I spent a couple of hours building a simple debris shelter. I'd done it before. Nothing fancy. Just a ridgepole leaned between 2 trees, branches stacked on both sides, and then layered with leaves, moss, bark, and pine boughs. It wasn't meant for looks. It just needed to keep me dry and warm. I set it up about 30 feet from the stream, close enough to hear the water but far enough that the cold air wouldn't sink in too hard overnight. Once the shelter was done, I unpacked some gear, rolled out my sleeping bag, tucked it inside the shelter, set down my food bag, sealed tight, near the base of a tree. My backpack leaned against a log just outside. I drank some water, ate a protein bar, and decided to gather more firewood before the sun dipped too low. I left everything as it was and walked uphill a bit, keeping the stream to my right so I wouldn't get turned around. I brought my little hatchet and started collecting dry sticks and branches, dragging them into a loose bundle. I was gone maybe 40 minutes, tops. When I got back, I stopped cold. My shelter was gone. Not broken, not collapsed, just gone. As if it had never been there. All the branches, the moss, the bark, gone. Nothing left on the ground except the clear spot where it had been. My sleeping bag was sitting upright on the dirt. My gear, my food bag, everything was still there, untouched. No signs of a struggle, no signs of an animal. Just that strange emptiness where the shelter had been. Like someone had come through, taken it apart carefully, piece by piece, and carried it away without leaving a single mark. I walked around in slow circles, looked for drag marks, footprints, even broken twigs. Nothing. The ground was soft with pine needles and moss, but still nothing. The branches I'd used weren't just lying around either. They were gone. All of them, carried off, it seemed, with care. Not snapped or scattered, not chewed or clawed. Just removed. It didn't make sense. I tried to come up with a reason. Maybe some backcountry ranger had passed through, but there were no signs of another person. No boot prints, no voice, no gear moved. My pack hadn't been touched. The food was sealed tight. Even the little pile of wood I'd started had been left exactly as I'd left it. The only thing missing was the shelter I had built with my own hands. I sat on the log for a long time, just staring. The air felt still in a way that wasn't normal, like everything was holding its breath. I rebuilt a small fire and sat by it, but I didn't try to build another shelter. I didn't see the point. I didn't feel safe. I couldn't explain what happened, and not being able to explain something out there, miles from anyone, is not a good feeling. As the light faded, I backed myself against the thickest tree I could find and sat with my knife open in my hand. I didn't even get into the sleeping bag. I just draped it over my legs and stayed awake, trying to listen past the sound of the stream. There were noises all night. Snaps, rustles, maybe normal forest sounds, maybe not, but every single one of them made my heart pound. The worst part was not knowing what I was afraid of, not knowing what I should be looking for. I'd rather hear an animal or even see someone, anything, but there was nothing. I didn't sleep. When the sun came up, I packed fast, just shoved everything back into my pack without organizing it. Ate a dry granola bar while I walked. I didn't even bother boiling water for coffee. I just wanted to be out of that basin. I took a different way out, climbed straight up the ridge instead of following the stream. Harder hike, but I didn't care. I felt exposed down there. I kept looking over my shoulder. Never saw anyone. That day I hiked over 10 miles. Way more than I'd planned. Didn't stop for lunch. Just kept walking, pushing toward a place I remembered from earlier. A rocky outcrop with wide visibility in all directions. When I got there, I set up camp again. Didn't build a shelter this time. Just laid out the bag on bare ground beside a boulder. I slept a little that night, maybe an hour at a time, but nothing happened. Just wind, cold air. Next morning, I hiked the rest of the way out. My car was still parked at the trailhead. Nothing touched. I didn't tell anyone for a while. Not because I was scared to, but because I didn't know how. What was I supposed to say? That someone took my shelter and left everything else? That they did it without leaving a mark? I replayed it in my head over and over. I thought maybe it had been some silent hunter, someone messing with me. But again, why leave everything else? Why not take the sleeping bag, the pack, the food? I even wondered if it had been some kind of warning. Like, someone saw me out there and decided to show me how vulnerable I really was. Like saying, asterisk, we can reach you. We're watching. Don't come back. Asterisk. That's the thought that stuck with me. Not fear, not confusion, but that quiet message. I've done a few more hikes since then, but I stay on trail now. I camp in established areas, and I never leave my gear unattended, not even for a few minutes. Whatever happened out there, I still don't have an answer. And I think that's what really gets to me. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't some accident. Someone or something was there, and they didn't want to be seen. My brother and I had been planning the trip for months. We wanted something remote, really remote, where we wouldn't see another person for days. Olympic National Park had that kind of wild, untouched space. After a long drive and a full day of hiking, we picked a spot deep in the woods. No trail nearby, no ranger outpost, no service. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones. The clearing we chose was about 30 yards wide, surrounded by thick old-growth trees. Moss-covered trunks, fallen branches, the smell of wet dirt and pine. We set up our tent near a big cedar, cooked a quick dinner on the camp stove, and sat in silence while the last of the light disappeared behind the trees. Everything felt still, like the forest was holding its breath. That night, around midnight, I woke up to a sound that didn't make sense. It was high-pitched, thin and sharp, and it cut through the air in a way that made me stop breathing. It wasn't a coyote, not an owl, not even something big like a cougar. It sounded stretched out, almost metallic, like a scream being pulled from something that didn't know how to scream. It came from the north. Then it stopped. My brother was awake too. I didn't have to look over to know it. The tent was silent, both of us barely moving. Then the sound came again, this time to the west. Still far enough not to see anything through the tent fabric, but definitely closer. Maybe 100 yards out. Then it came again behind us. We didn't say a word, just laid there stiff, listening. The sound circled us. Same scream, same distance. Always on the move, never rushing. It felt like it was trying to push us, guide us, like we were being slowly herded without it ever getting too close. The forest was so dense around us, we couldn't see more than 20 feet even in daylight. At night, it was like sitting in ink. Every now and then I thought I could hear faint footsteps, dry leaves being pressed under weight, but it was impossible to be sure. My ears were playing tricks, trying to fill in the spaces between the screams. We stayed like that for hours, not sleeping, just waiting for the sun. No more screams after a while, just the silence again, and the occasional cracking sound from deep in the trees. Could have been anything, branches snapping from wind or age, but they didn't sound random. They came too spaced out, too evenly, like movement. When it finally got light, it wasn't sudden, just a slow change from black to gray. The first thing we did was unzip the tent and scan around. Nothing, no prints, no movement, just that early morning mist hugging the ground and the smell of damp earth. We stood there for a few minutes, trying to act like it was normal, trying to shake the night off. My brother walked over to a tree about 30 feet from our tent and froze. He didn't say anything, just stared. I walked up beside him, The bark was torn up. Long vertical claw marks, maybe 8 or 10 feet off the ground. They weren't fresh like it had just happened during the night, but they weren't old either. The tree looked like something had gripped it and twisted, stripping bark off in a spiral motion. It didn't look like any natural damage I'd seen before. I've seen what bears do to trees. This wasn't that. It wasn't shredding. It was as if something had tried to bore into it, rotating as it gouged the surface. There were smaller marks too, about waist height, like deep scratches made by something moving in circles around the trunk. Moss was scraped off in patches, showing raw wood underneath. It didn't look like any animal I knew. It looked deliberate, careful. We didn't talk. We didn't eat. We didn't even take down the tent properly. Just shoved everything into our packs as fast as we could. The walkout felt longer than it should have. Every branch snap, every rustle of wind through the trees felt like it was something just behind us, watching, tracking. The forest was dense, and there were too many shadows to feel safe. About a mile from our site, we found a downed tree across our path. It hadn't been there 2 days earlier when we came in. It was thick, old, roots exposed, like it had been yanked over. There was no sign of rot, no storm damage. It looked recent. The soil around the roots was still damp and loose. We climbed over it and kept moving, fast. The only time we stopped was for water, and even then we kept one eye on the trees. We didn't feel okay until we heard distant road noise again, until we stepped out of the forest and saw my truck still parked where we left it. We didn't talk about it during the drive back. We were both too wired, like the adrenaline hadn't faded yet. Every sound from the radio made me flinch. Even when we got home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, like a part of the woods had followed us back, stuck to us somehow. Later, I tried researching the area, looked up animal calls, strange reports, even missing persons. I found a few vague stories. People hearing strange screams in that part of the park. Reports of trees marked in unusual ways. Nothing official. No explanations. What stuck with me most wasn't the sound or the scratches. It was the way it moved, the way it circled us. Whatever it was, it didn't want to attack. It wanted us to leave, and it knew exactly how to make that happen. We never went back.